Hello everyone, we're going to be talking today about how to create a form to sign up to your newsletter. We're going to be using the Mailchimp API and Next.js API routes, which is a very cool feature that we're going to be talking about today. So this is our subscribe to my newsletter form. We have these three behaviors that if we subscribe with no email, we get this error message. If for any other reason something bad happens, like trying to put in a fake email, we'll get another kind of error message. And if everything goes well, we will get a success message. And we'll look at how to implement this. So before diving into the newsletter implementation, let's talk a bit about API routes and what they are in Next.js. So in Next.js, you have a pages directory. This is where everything happens. If we look at this pages directory, you have a few files. Every file that you will create here will create a page. You will have a /about page, a /blog page, but this pages directory has a special kind of folder, which is the API folder. Anything you put under the API folder, it won't create a page. It will create an API route. And we will see what this API route is right now. So I've created a very simple example, a hello world route. All it needs to do is export a function that gets a request object and a response object. It can do anything it wants with the request, and in the end it should return a response. So in this case, all the function does is returns a successful response with this JSON, which is message hello world. Now, to see how this actually looks like, if I now go to /API/hello world, I'm getting this response back. So basically, I've created a server endpoint. Now, another cool thing about these API routes is that if you deploy them to now.sh, which is now called Versal.com, this is a platform created by Zeit. They are the company that created and maintained Next.js. So if you deploy your project here, basically what they do is they take each of these API routes and they create a serverless function from it, which is pretty nice if you want to kind of easy access into the serverless world. So this is as easy as it gets. It all gets managed behind the scenes and you don't even need to know how this happens. I don't, at least. Okay, before we dive into the server-side implementation, let's just, to get it out of the way, for completeness sake, let's look at the implementation of the newsletter component. So this is the component that makes the request to subscribe to the newsletter. We have three state variables here. The first one is email, just to capture the email from the input. The second one is called state. It's kind of a state machine. It embodies the component state, which could be idle before anything happened. Loading, when we try the request. Success or error. And we have the error message, which is the error message returned by the server, which we want to display. So let's look at the component. Everything you see here is Tailwind CSS. It's a very cool framework that I'm planning to make videos about in the future. I have a few videos where I live stream, but not too much about Tailwind. So here's my input. I just set the email and here's my button. When we click it, I call the subscribe function that we're going to look at. Two additional things I do here is I have whenever the state equals loading, then I disable the button because I don't want people to click it multiple times. And I also add this kind of loading state gradient animation. When the state equals error, I display the error message, and when the state equals success, I display the success message. So let's look at the subscribe function. It's an async function because I use await. So this is async await, if you know it. So once I start the function, I set the state to loading, just to get the loading state going on. I initialize the error message if there was one. Then I hit this endpoint API/newsletter. This is our API route, which we are going to be looking at, and I send it the email parameter. If everything went well, I set the state to success. If something failed, I set the error message I get from the server, and I set the state to error. So this is all that happens in the component I showed you before. And now we're going to be looking at the server-side implementation of it. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at the API route. This file is also called newsletter, but as you can see, it sits in pages/API/newsletter, which makes it an API route. And as an API route, it exports a function that accepts a request and a response. Again, it's an async function because I use await. Now, what do we do in this function? We're going to go over step by step and talk about what we do here. So first of all, the request has a body which holds the email parameter that we passed in the request. So I take this email parameter. If there is no email or it's empty string, then I return 400 status with the message forgot to add your email. So this is the case where you didn't enter your email. Now I actually try to hit the Mailchimp API. So I have this function we're going to look at called getRequestParams. It holds everything I need to make a call to Mailchimp, but it's nice that it's separated into a different function, because if I want to move to a different email provider other than Mailchimp, then I just need to replace this function and implement it for that specific provider. So once I get the stuff I need, which we're going to be looking at in a minute, I make a call, a post request to Mailchimp with all my data. If this request was successful, I return a 201 status, which is a created status, and with no error. And if I did have any error, I'm just translating whatever Mailchimp returns into this generic error and telling the user that he can just send me an email and I'll add him to the mailing list. So this is our API route, pretty simple. And now let's look at the Mailchimp part of it. There's a few gotchas here. First of all, I have my API key and my list ID. So in Mailchimp, you create a list, and this is the list that you're subscribing the user to. I'm saving these two variables in a .env file. Okay, this .env is a common practice just to keep secrets, keep kind of API keys, anything you don't want other people to see. So this file doesn't get committed into GitHub, and these keys need to be set on the server specifically. So we'll look at it in a second. So I get my API key and I get my list ID. Now Mailchimp API keys, they all look like this. They have some kind of hash and then US something. This US something, they call it the data center. And we use this data center as part of the URL. So the way the URL for Mailchimp looks like this, okay? So it's got the data center inside. So the way I take the data center, I'm just splitting my API key by this symbol, and then I'm taking the second part, which gives me the US 6 or 4 or 5 or whatever. Okay, so now I'm constructing my URL like this. I'm gonna be creating a post request to /lists/list_id/members. Their API is a REST API, if you know REST. Now I'm passing in all the request parameters. You can see a full list right here, but I'm only passing the email address. So it's email address, and this is the email I was passing into this function as a parameter, and the status that is subscribed, meaning I'm subscribing this user. And now the third part of this function regards authorization to the Mailchimp API. And this part, I was looking a lot around the web. It was very hard to find a concise way of doing it. So hopefully I'm helping out people that were looking like I was. First of all, you need to take your API key, and what they're expecting is that you will take a string, which is anything you want. This could be any string, and then 2 dots and the API key. You need to convert this into base 64. So this is what I'm doing here. And then I'm setting a header, an authorization header, which is, this is called basic HTTP authorization. So it's the word basic followed by the base 64 encoded API key. So these are the headers that I need to pass on to MailChimp. So now I'm returning everything that I just created, which is the URL, the data that I'm sending, which is this, and these headers. I'm taking these, I'm deconstructing them, and I'm passing them to my Axios request. So as far as code goes, we've seen all the code involved in subscribing a user to your mailing list. But now I want to share a few gotchas that I encountered along the way. So first thing, your MailChimp list ID. So they don't call it lists now, they call it audience. And how do you get your list ID? So I entered this audience tab, I saw this ID equals whatever, and I just assumed that this is my list ID. And I think I wasted a lot of time until I understood that that actually wasn't my list ID. So to get my list ID, I just made a GET request to /lists, and then I got my list and I could see the ID. But apparently, if you want to see it, is on the MailChimp interface, when you go into audience, you choose settings, you go to audience name and defaults, and there you will see your list ID listed. So get your correct list ID. Another gotcha I want to share with you is related to the Nth Variables. So as I told you, I'm storing my secrets in a .env file, and then I can access them with process.env.variable name. So inside this env file, what I was having, the issue I was having was, at first, my key was written like this, and I think Prettier was even adding like this space. That's why I added the Prettier ignore here. And then when this was used inside the API route, it was being used with these quote signs. So that was actually giving me an invalid API key. So this is one thing, just like write your Nth variables without a space and without any quotes. And another gotcha is that whenever you change an Nth variable, you have to restart your Next server. So instead of debugging and not understanding why it's not updating, so you have to restart your server. Okay, so this is what I have for you guys today. I hope this was helpful. This is actually my first YouTube tutorial, so I hope you liked it and it was good. Please leave any comments with things to improve or things you would like to see more tutorials about. I can tell you that I plan on putting out more tutorials. They're going to be related to Next.js, Tailwind CSS, and some of the integrations that I'll be putting in this site, like Sanity.io, which is my CMS of choice for this website. The website is now live. It's not done yet, so it's not on my official domain, but it's live on uriklar/nextnowsh. So feel free to subscribe to my newsletter. And if you want to see the code for this, so the project is public on GitHub. You can see it right here on my GitHub profile, uriklar-next. And that's it. Leave your comment and subscribe. Bye bye.